All right, I've had 2 shutdowns now trying to watch this board meeting with the software. Let's try again. But I was scrolling through posts. I guess I can't scroll through posts at the same time.
Doug is already referenced.
Anyway, yeah, I was talking about Stovall, all right? And Stovall was present and enabled all the union busting tactics of Neil McFarland. And there were all kinds of dirty tricks that were played on union employees while Randy Stedman was the head of HR. He did everything he could. He broke laws. They violated laws. They stole money from our checks. They did everything they could to screw with us. And Stovall enabled all of that. So Stovall, even though they're trying to make a hero out of him, he was actually a neoliberal criminal. All right, that's what he was. And now let Gresham have him. And I can tell you, people at Gresham, you're fucked with that guy in charge of your city.
Reference that will refrain from putting forth any resolution.
Oh, shut up. Get lost. I don't want to hear you anymore.
And our safety protocols. Specific from Finance and Audit, we'll give you a full briefing on the financial picture from Nancy and Dee here. First, I do want to continue keeping at the forefront here the challenges with COVID and the successes with COVID. I do want to acknowledge right now, I think we're all well aware, as this agency is going through, the world is going through, the significant surge that's underway right now. That's across the region, and our thoughts and prayers continue with our own employees as well as their family members and our customers as well.
The good old
it really has taken a toll on all of us with, frankly, I think we all know somebody who's probably been touched by this now, and it continues. So we're not immune. We're doing everything we can inside the agency to slow the spread of this. We've even come up with new ways to intensify our cleaning and our safety protocols. Specifically, one example is we've just added a new tool to our toolkit. It's referred to as an electrostatic sprayer, and who would have thought we'd be talking about that at a board meeting, but here we are. But what it is we've purchased 28 of them that we're using on our buses and trains. They're a backpack sprayer, and not only is it a cleaner, but the cleaning solution actually is electrostatically charged, which actually helps with the cleaning it coats the surface way more thoroughly, and frankly allows us to be a lot more productive. So that's an example of, as Travis has always pushed us all on, myself included, is on innovation. Is an example where we keep working on tools and techniques to help reinvent ourselves even during the crisis of this game. So this is just the latest one, and seems to be working out really well. So we've also just let people know that all our daily services has the bus barriers on them now. We did have, I think I'd mentioned, our spare ratio, which is kind of offline. Our smaller buses, we had supplier problems, and we had these temporary barriers up. We're in the final stages of installations of those. So by this time at the next board meeting, literally the whole fleet will be done with all the bus barriers, even including our spare.
So they're still not done, in other words. They're still not all bus barriers. I thought they were done months ago, but they're not even done as of this board meeting.
Which is great, not only for COVID and the transmission as a secondary benefit, but also from an operator assault perspective. So this will serve us, let's use the crisis to help us for the future. So I think this will serve operator assaults as well as this and COVID 2021, whatever comes our way. So I think it's a really sound investment for the protection of our employees for the future. And also just a reminder for those who are actually out using the system, and it may seem odd, we actually, as part of the OHA recommendations, we have our front windows open on the to help us to move the air through on the buses. So as we're getting to that cooler weather right now, we'll have the heat turned up, but we still want to have the windows open. So it just helps with air circulation on the system. So just a reminder for any and all who use the system. That's why we're doing it. It's really for making sure we optimize the health profile of our buses while we can. So we're also on the safety side of things, just making sure for even the board members, use your ice grips, by the way, because we're getting to that colder weather, just as a safety side. If any of the board members need them, we'll get them for you. Just put them on if you're those times of ice and snow where we don't want anybody slipping or sliding around here as we get into the colder weather coming on us. Specific to ridership, for November, we provided about 3 million trips, just over 3 million trips in November. Again, as you had heard at Finance and Audit Committee, and you'll see some in the numbers here, we're down just under 61% in our ridership, so 40% is our base from November compared to 2019.
They're down 60%.
The specifically bus saw a 59% decrease in weekly ridership, and Max was down about 63%, with West down nearly 78%, and that's been pretty consistent through the piece.
78% down on West. All these, of course, they're not going to, West should be stopped. I won't do it because it's corrupt.
We are seeing less of a drop off in off-peak versus peak hours slightly. And we are seeing this in a lot of other parts of the country where people are down in the ridership even 70, 80% in some cases. So this continues, particularly with the lockdown, the double downing now of don't travel unless you absolutely have to from the governor's order. That is going to continue for a number of weeks. We need to be safe and do it right. So I anticipate that this...
Of course, everything they've done has failed. You do know that, right? So it's just... They've done everything wrong, basically, in this country. Everything. And they continue to do it wrong. And now they passed this ridiculous stimulus bill, which is, I'm sure, another pork barrel for the billionaire class. And meanwhile, our goddamn currency keeps getting devalued, and it just gets better and better by the minute.
Will continue for a period of time before we can hopefully, with the great news is what's encouraging is the vaccine. There is a light in the tunnel. I don't know how far away that light is, but I think it's we are on the list of the second tier currently of our employees, our essential employees, receiving the vaccine as it materializes out. So I think the intention is that to be those in immediate health need and elderly, emergency responders, and nurses, of course, and doctors, the medical profession, and then we're in that second tier, I think somewhere at the top. So I think that's still being moved around a bit, but we're very much on the radar screen. So I just want to let you know I'm working, and I've asked for an update from my team around once our time does come, what is our specific implementation plan? So we've got to be ready. Who's going where, when, and how. So just to let the board know that that work is underway right now for the next phase that will be coming our way. So, but encouraging news, but we have some challenging few months ahead. But this is all about getting ready for it around February or hopefully sooner if we can. So next item up I've got is financial update for those who were at the Finance and Audit Committee today, as President Warner and Director Stovall had spoken about. I'm now going to turn it over. Now, Dee was not at Finance and Audit Committee. She was on a call with Lloyd's of London here today and some other related business. Nancy did a really great job at Finance.
Lloyd's of London? What the fuck are they doing with Lloyd's of London?
Audit Committee with her, but I am going to turn it over to Dee, and I don't know how you want to manage this to give a financial update to the full board and to the public at large. So Dee, over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Sorry I was not able to make it to the F&A, but Nancy is well prepared, and she is planning to do the presentation to the board as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy now.
Great. Thank you, Dee and Doug. Jeff has given me the ability to share, so give me just a second here while I share my screen with you.
All right, here we got some stuff. Here we got something that may actually be good. Let's see what they got for us.
There we go. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. This is an update to our financial outlook for the end of fiscal 2021 and beyond.
And beyond.
Private payroll taxes are looking better at just over 5%.
All right. Okay. Budget actual. Prior year. Look at this. Prior year, they budgeted 115 and they came. So the payroll taxes are hardly down at all. It's down 5%. Difference, 6.2 billion, 0.4%. That's like nothing. Isn't that something?
than what was budgeted, but still down from the prior year by 5%. So this is a little bit of an improvement from
Yeah.
our presentation that we made to you in September.
That's not very bad at
Passenger
all.
revenue, of course, is a direct reflection of our ridership levels and is down just over 31% from our budgeted amount and almost 61% from the.
And remember, that's only 13% of operating costs. So keep that in mind when they say it's down 60%. It's only 13% of operating revenue.
Prior year. As part of the response to the pandemic, Trimet, like other transit entities, stopped accepting cash on the system. Cash payments have been reinstated, and we anticipate seeing an uptick in the passenger revenues going forward, but of course that may be dependent on the stay-at-home orders as we go forward. This is a slight improvement from our presentation in September, but still under the budgeted amount for fiscal year 2021. Our federal formula funding, as previously presented to you, is that Trimet will not be penalized in our formula funding due to a drop in ridership. Federal formula funding generally provides approximately $63 million in any given year.
For what?
Our forecast is that the federal formula funding will be flat in fiscal year 2022,
So
but growing slightly about.
So they're going to get the same. I'm not sure what they use that for. Is this for operations or is this capital projects?
2% or 1.3 million per year thereafter. Trimet has drawn down the entire 185 million or just under that of CARES Act funding as of mid-October. And while we're hoping for additional stimulus funding, we have not included any additional federal funding in the.
So where did it all go? I want to know where that
The
185
funding
went.
is coming in better than projected. Any amounts received over the 13 million that we are still waiting for in fiscal 21 will be put into a restricted account until the STIP plan for the fiscal year 22 and 23 has been approved.
So the tax grab is still coming in as projected. No effect on that, as you can see.
There's no change to our service that we presented to you from September. We continue to evaluate the service needs and the restoration going forward. Our current projections show service coming back to pre-COVID levels mid-year 2024. This is not intended to.
Okay, so they're not going to have, so the bus service is crippled until, forget the bus service. It's gone. It's only for the losers at this point. It's just for the people who can't afford to drive.
Be a projection of ridership returning, which is forecasted to return to pre-COVID sometime in fiscal 2027.
Did you hear that? The ridership is predicted to come back to pre-COVID level in 2027. Yeah. If we still exist as a country, who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 years.
Our fixed route ridership continues around 39% of where we were at 1 year ago, or we're down 61%. While our ridership started a modest return in May, continuing all the way through August, September brought a slight decline due to the fires. And while October was up just a little bit, that had to do with our Still Bridge restoration and the bridging that we did. And then we took a slight dip in November again due to the new stay-at-home and social distancing requirements. Ridership is projected to increase upwards towards 50% of our pre-COVID levels by the end of calendar year 2021, with projection of 100% return by fiscal year 2027.
So you already said that.
Our operating expenses is a definite positive change. We are almost 18% under budget, and this is a notable accomplishment, given that Trimet hired 130 cleaners, which caused us to actually increase our operating expenditure budget over the prior year, and that was after making numerous operating cuts.
So where did that come from? Where did the operating cuts come from? Service reduction. So that's where it came from. Hiring freeze. Remember the fuel cost? Remember when they raised the fares because the fuel was expensive, and then the fuel got cheap again, and they never brought the fares back down. These are criminals here running this, as far as I'm concerned. They don't run it for us. They run it for them.
Governments are making a conservative effort to reduce their spending through deferrals and just the pace at which they're spending. So at a high level, those cost-cutting measures continue with hiring freezes, wage freezes, reductions in our day-to-day operating costs, and deferring of some costs. In addition, some of our utilities and diesel fuels are running at less than projected. Our financial modeling assumptions, our ridership is anticipated to slowly return to those pre-COVID levels by mid-fiscal year 2027. The anticipated fare increase has been moved out 1 year, starting in fiscal 20.
Yeah, so they're going in the wrong direction, of course. There's just no new thinking here. This is about what you expect from Trimet management. They're just not going to think outside of the box. They are the box. They're gonna continue making it so that people don't want to ride.
2023 and then every other year thereafter. The Division Transit Project is forecasted at just over 2,200 weekly vehicle hours, starting approximately September of 2022.
Yeah, that's that's the worst thing to be doing right now. That should have been canceled, and it wasn't. That should have been gone. It's completely of no value now, but it's a capital project, so it gets to stay.
Red Line project is anticipated to start in fiscal year 2024, but is dependent upon the federal appropriation.
Get rid of that.
MAX service restoration is planned through fiscal year 2024, and bus restoration or preservation continues over the next few years. Bus should experience.
So they're bringing the MAX back all the way. The MAX only had like 8% cut in the first place. I mean, it's a light rail transit agency. Eric was always right about that. The agency is all about light rail and not buses.
Full service restoration by the end of fiscal year 2024, and again ridership by the end of fiscal 2027. Some of our assumptions. While there's no change to this, I do want to comment on a couple items. We have not anticipated any additional federal funding, such as the CARES Act, within our current financial forecast model. Debt is remaining at the 7.5% of continuing revenues. This is a factor that we're looking at very closely as a result of the loss of our continuing revenues. Our month's operating reserves. We're planning to have a higher month's operating reserves when we end fiscal 21 and 22 to address shortfalls in funding in the fiscal year 2023 through fiscal year 2027 time period. For our materials and services, we have no automatic increase across the board for those lines.
Wait a minute. Debt ceiling. Month's operating reserve. 2 months. Materials and service hasn't been cut. Capital investments, I don't know. Personal service maintained. So they didn't really cut personal service either. They better continue the pension contributions.
Items where we have direct control. Our general fund capital investments are projected at $18.5 million for fiscal year 2022 and $10 million thereafter. The emphasis here is that this is for our general fund contribution. While not sufficient to cover all of Trimet's needs, the funding is at a level which addresses mission critical and safety priorities. The acquisition.
Mission critical is providing service. That's mission critical. Not J.C. Vanetta government affairs.
Our construction and major capital assets, of course, can be paid for with bond funds. And in addition, our forecast does not reflect projects that would be paid for with external funding. Personal services will be maintained at the existing fiscal year 2021 levels through fiscal year 2022, but then increasing thereafter through fiscal year 2027. And then our pension contributions remain as previously approved by the board at $5.5 million for the management plan and $25 million for the union plan. Some of our cost-cutting efforts since the pandemic began, of course, includes those reduced services within all of our modes of transportation. We've also paused on service expansion, and we are continuing to maintain reliability, but we have adjusted for capacity, taking into consideration social distancing requirements. We continue with our hiring and wage freezes. We are limiting the number of new positions going forward into fiscal 2022. We are evaluating existing vacant positions to see if those duties and responsibilities can be spread to other employees. Of course, we've limited our travel and taken advantage of online training where available. And as mentioned earlier, all the divisions have made a conservative effort to watch their expenses and defer or reduce those expenses since the beginning of the fiscal year. In addition, we've deferred or descoped some capital projects where possible. So what does this all mean to the bottom line? Well, when we met with you in September, our shortfall for the next 5 years was $133 million. And as of the end of October, we've been able to reduce that down to $106 million. The October forecast is $27 million better than that September forecast. In fiscal 2023, we will be utilizing available STIF funding for service preservation, but it will likely not be enough to cover all service. While the CARES Act funding helped us get through fiscal year 2021 and balance into fiscal 2022, it also is enabling us to push fund balance forward past fiscal year 2022 to help offset the deficit in fiscal year 2023. Some of the other updates include that our payroll tax information, we have implemented a more immediate growth, but slower growth long-term. While it's still not meeting our pre-COVID projections, we expect a permanent loss of approximately $10.2 million due to business closures, layoffs, workforce reductions, and pay cuts. And again, our fiscal 21 and 22 ending fund balance will have increased to help us address some of those shortfalls in fiscal 2023. But at the end of fiscal 2023, fund balance is forecasted to be back at the 2.25 months operating reserves in each year thereafter. So clearly we're going to need additional revenues or expense reductions needed past fiscal 2022 through fiscal year 2027. The good news is that we have at our disposal some levers that can be pulled. We will be continuing to evaluate service levels, fare increases, further reducing our day-to-day operating expenses and general fund-backed capital investments. We'll also look at personnel decisions such as wage freezes, hiring freezes, layoffs, which all...
Wage freezes, wage freezes, wage freezes. They get to work at home, no problem for them. You out in the field, too bad, wage freezes.
Contribute to cost-cutting efforts.
You
So
heard
I'd like
it.
to just go ahead and pause right
You ain't
now
getting
and
shit.
turn it back to Doug to see if he wanted to provide any additional comments and then
ain't
open it
getting
up for
shit.
questions.
Yeah. No, thanks, Nancy. And this is it's always easy to expand. It's always challenging to manage the cost side of things. I will mention that at Finance and Audit Committee, we did have a discussion around, the role of the federal government and how that may fit into this, particularly with the President-elect Biden administration. So that is something that we aren't banking on. Once the CARES Act runs out, we're on our own, but we believe that some of the other larger transit agencies, i.e. New York, Chicago, Atlanta's have come to mind off the top, are probably going to be they are in fact a lot more difficult financial strait than what this agency is, thanks to this board's stewardship of great finances over.
It's got nothing to do with the fucking board, you fucking liar. It's got to do with the fact that it's a payroll tax and there's such a tiny amount of service being paid for by riders anyway. It's got nothing to do with the fucking board. You fucking brown-nosing neoliberal hack. Go back to fucking Canada.
the years. We are in far better shape than many of them.
Yeah.
Some of them, in fact, have cut routes back by not cutting them back, but they cut out 40% of the routes right now in service. So
yeah, and they don't have a payroll tax. Okay, and you do. Why don't you bring that up, Dougie? Why don't you tell the truth? Your operation is funded by payrolls.
they are going to be hitting this wall quickly. I think we have levers at our disposal, as Nancy has reflected. So I think there will be a place for the federal government, but we can't bank on it as we look to manage these assumptions at this point in time. So with that, we'll pause here and see if there's any questions any of the board members may have.
Public transportation is kind of like the stimulus that the citizens got. The oligarchy doesn't care about public transport. They don't care. They're actually pro gasoline anyway. They want cars and roads. They're going to give, public transportation is done, man. It's finished. And what they need to do is make sure that they can preserve service and they need to eliminate all their capital projects. They need to be buckling down. They're not going to do any of that because the agency is a capital projects controlled agency. And that's the problem the public has with this. The public is last in the equation. You see this playing out everywhere. It's just Boston, they're just going to cut you. They don't care, man. They're getting this tax money. It's a steady flow of money. And they're going to cut you before they cut themselves, believe me.
So board members, feel free to speak up or raise your hand.
Yes, I had a question on our operating reserves at 2.25 months. What has been our typical operating reserves?
So we originally had a 2.5 months operating reserves, and it was a hard number. And about 2 years ago, we submitted to the board of directors for a change in that to have an approved range from 2 to 2.5% months operating reserves. So we're holding at that 2.25. We feel that there's more risk if you drop it down to that just 2 months operating reserves. That's where we're holding constant. But again, in fiscal 21 and 22, we are planning an increased ending fund balance to help with the deficits that you see in fiscal year 2023.
I would also add to that the reserve balance is part of our adopted strategic financial plan guidelines, and it was previously said, as Nancy said, at 2.5 weeks. It's not enough. Months. It's not going to be enough to solve problems, but it does at least give us a soft landing while we figure out what to do next.
Thank you.
Kathy, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to just ask around some of the different positions that might be, temporarily suspended just due to the budget outlook. So perhaps this might be a question for Doug or anyone else, but can you tell me a little bit more about what those positions are?
Yeah,
that
thank you.
Had anticipated filling or hiring.
Thank you.
And then the second piece to that is around the 130 or so, I could think was.
Yeah, give us some specifics. What are you doing? What's getting cut exactly? Yeah, we know you're back at night. You cut 10% off the top of the operating budget of the bus. You cut 10% bus service. Okay, so it costs $450 million to operate the bus, so they save $45 million by cutting 10%. Okay, now where's the other cuts? Let's hear it.
The number that Nancy had said about the cleaning staff and what our, what is our plan to retain that sort of, that workforce that I feel like still in the midst of this resurgence or second wave of COVID, we still, I imagine, would need around that many people or maybe even more to do the essential work.
Right.
Maybe I can tackle this one.
Right.
Maybe we'll start with your last point first, Director Way. To the cleaners, this is something I intend to fiercely protect, particularly while we're going through COVID. If we don't have cleanliness and safety, then no matter how hard we try, people aren't going to be coming. So this gets to the fundamental fabric of confidence and trust.
Of course, the real way to handle this is to have as many buses running as possible, so there's no overcrowding at all. But they're not going to do that, as they just told you. They're cutting, not add. They should be adding. But we don't have the ridership. You know, it's a self-perpetuating loop.
To come back to the system when it comes. So particularly through COVID, in a post-COVID world, whatever that looks like, if we take the vaccine at its word and it plays out this time next year that we're back to even a day without masks, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, right.
So we'll evaluate that in a separate viewpoint. The goal is to keep the system clean. Will we apply it? We'll keep some of the technologies for sure, because it makes sense, like the electrostatic. It's productive, it's cost efficient, it's safe. We'll use the foggers, for example. So this crisis will leave us a residue, if you will, of some benefit, despite the huge problems. So they will benefit all of us for higher standards at 99.9% every day. Every bus will be going out with them being fogged, as an example, or those electrostatic. So the number of bodies related to it, or individuals, that will have to be evaluated based on our financial circumstance, but at least keep it to an appropriate level. What that is, I think we still have to play that out. So to some of the other positions. So, for example, as it relates to service, so we cut back service to 80%. So when the intention of CARES Act was to not lay people off, and we have done that to the T. We've not laid anyone off at this point in time. But as the CARES Act runs out, unless there's another CARES Act 2, CARES Act 3, whatever it might be termed, then we're on our own. And so right now we'd reduce service down to 80%. We still get people.
I thought, okay, everybody, I thought service was 90%, but here you hear it right here. Service is 80%. Okay, it's 80%. It's not 90%. It's 80%.
Employed. Then we went back up to 90% on referencing the bus service back in September.
Oh, okay.
So
they did go back to 90%.
We will have to at some point adjust the demand down to our affordability to essential service levels if there's not new revenues. With that would come bus operators and the relation of the associated work that is directly related to putting a bus out on service. That's on one part of it. There's other parts which right now we're looking at not replacing jobs, which is part of your question. So jobs that we are replacing, for example, if we have someone in the control room who leaves, I have to replace that. And I authorize that right away, because that's part of just running the service and running it safely. We will not compromise positions that are directly related to running a safe system. That was back to those 4 variable corner posts.
Like what?
That is not up for play in my mind. There are staff positions. For example, I'll give you one that I have not approved. It's an analyst in our transportation group. And so those who have staff roles, we're going to have to reevaluate. How do we synergize jobs? How do we reevaluate? How do we tighten the ship up, but still being able to provide our service?
It's not rocket science. People that are involved with providing service stay. Everybody else goes. Why is that so hard? Okay, why is that so hard? Capital projects should be going. They should be getting rid of them right as we speak. They should be going now. Last time I looked at the capital projects department, it was dozens of 6-figure people.
So we may even pull back on some of the discretionary projects we had wanted to advance that have long lead times. So I'm looking at capital right now, for example, that have multi-year impacts. It's just by approving it today may have 4 or 5 years of economic impact related to them. So we're going to be tightening up the capital side of our projects list.
Obviously, they need to stop those right away, but you know who runs the place
at this point in time. Because it's not only the people that come with it, or it's the equipment, it's the cost of infrastructure as well. So we're looking at sort of all shapes and sizes, between fixed to deliver service to the variable costs of staff versus line, I'll call it, which types of positions.
Thank you, Doug. I think my only comment in response to what you just shared with the, I think trying to protect as much as we reasonably can with our financial outlook. The cleaners, the essential people, really folks on the front lines or bus drivers, with as much benefit to their health as we can possible, because these folks on an ongoing basis are getting exposed day in and day out to COVID, quite frankly, and we just know from public health data that this situation is going to become a lot worse. The infection rates are going to become a lot worse by the end of, by around Christmas actually is what they're projecting. So I just really wanted to make sure that I state that the importance of, again, protecting those on the front lines. And I know that the state, I just heard the other day, has said if folks are exposed to COVID and they tested positive, they can also take advantage of a 2-week, I think it's called the COVID pay. So I just wanted to, again, state that when we're talking about equity and public safety, the safety, the bodies, the health of the actual people that do the work for us on the front lines every day, I think is central to the work that we're going to do.
Well, talk doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no, thank you, Director Way, for that, because I think you're quite right. So as an example where we have not cut back, in fact, we've invested more, we've actually put a extended leave policy in place directly related to COVID to actually help people even beyond knowing the uniqueness of these times. So we've actually invested more than we have under a non-COVID time to help, because we know those things are real and they do exist. So so I think those will continue as long as COVID's going to continue, for sure. So I totally agree, and and we also are seeing this. We've got numbers now of over 50 employees who've been impacted at varying stages. Some are back, some aren't, and some have picked it up from other sources, clearly beyond Trimet. And that we're managing all those issues, because if people don't have their health, the rest of this doesn't matter. And so, and it's not just our frontline workers, which for sure have a high touch point to the public and others, but we have these in our offices and our mechanics and others that are doing really important work. So this ghost of a virus has no place it stops. And so it's front, back, sideways. It's in every direction possible. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking of one individual right now who's is off with COVID in one of our leadership roles. So it touches everywhere. So yes, I totally agree with you. We won't be cutting that back as long as COVID is existing.
The leadership of nothing.
All right. Director Bauman.
Yes, thank you. If I recall correctly, I want to...
All right, we're going to cut it because I'm tired of it. We'll pick it up again maybe tomorrow.